from Alameda, California, the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network presents Flying High Over the Zone with the Zigzag Man.
I am back, and you are flying high with me, the Zigzag Man, in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco, in the northern part of what I consider to be the greatest state in the Union. Now, I always get an argument. Ronnie Rabinovitz is here, my old buddy and fellow podcaster on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And,
hi, Ralph. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. You give me an argument for Minnesota's the greatest place to live. Am I right? Ronnie will tell you that. And his guest is from elsewhere. Where are you from, Jack?
I'm in Redondo Beach, California.
Oh, so I'm in the northern part. You're in the southern part. I guess we got you beat, Ron. It's 2-1, California.
Yeah, that's right. I'd rather be where you guys are, believe me. It's
well,
cold as hell here.
Get on a plane, get on a train. What did Wilbur Harrison said, Kansas City.
This came from
would you introduce our esteemed guest? I gave it away. His first name
I'd be
is
happy
Jack.
to. I'd be happy to.
Keeping score.
It's a very special guest we have tonight. It's Jack O'Halloran. And Jack has a very interesting story about his life and legacy. And he has a very interesting book called Family Legacy. It's very fascinating. I read it the last few days. I've been going over it. And welcome, Jack. I'm glad you're here with us tonight.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, we're delighted to have you, Jack.
Yeah.
Tell us about your family legacy, if you would.
Family legacy is written. I had kind of an infamous father from in New York. He was probably one of the most infamous Italians that ever came into the country, Albert Anastasia.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Had a little company called Murder Incorporated.
That's
yeah,
right.
You're understating that quite a bit.
He's partners with Luciana and Charlie and Frank Costello and Meyer, and so I felt that it was time that some people told the truth about some things, and that's what we did in Family Legacy. We're going to we've got one book out. There's 3 more going to come, and we're going to go back and forth to the beginning of when they migrated to America back in 1850. My father came in around 1919. But as they came in, they set up in different places like Roman legions and all along the port sides of the country, and then in the middle in Chicago and Kansas City. And we're going to tell the truth about how, for a long period of time, government, industry, organized crime, and union were all partners. They were all partners, and how they took a lot of the illicit money that they made and they funded the country. They invested in Westinghouse and General Electric and all the unions to be in construction jobs and everything, and made sure the people had jobs.
Dare I say that one of their partners was the church, the Catholic Church?
That was their main partner. They're the ones that funded them coming into the country. If you ever stop and think when you look at every major city in America, all the cathedrals and the prime churches are all sitting on prime real estate in every city?
Yes, they are.
Catholic Church owned Yankee Stadium at one time.
Really?
That's right.
I didn't know that. That's true.
Yeah.
How old? Let's set a time thing here. May I ask how old you are? I'm 71, so
I'm 74.
So is Ronnie. We're not ashamed of our age. We're proud.
I'm 72.
74 years old.
Okay.
Pardon me?
I'm 72.
74 years old.
Yeah, well, Ronnie, you guys are old, as a matter of fact.
You're 71.
71 is the new 68, guys.
Yeah, right.
74 is the new 54,
That's right. Exactly. Exactly.
I like to think so. And you've got a passion for getting the word out. Now, so I'm just trying to think. In the 50s, you were just a kid when all this, and for the most part,
father was assassinated in '57. I was 14 years old.
Oh man!
So I was.
I'm sorry for your loss. All these years later, I want to tell you, I'm sorry for your loss.
He was kind of an individual.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
What was he like as a dad, aside what he did for a living?
I never. I was a World War II romance that my father was in. When they were looking for him in 1942 and 43, while Lipke was in jail, and they were looking all over for Albert, he was in the Army in Indian Gap, Pennsylvania, teaching soldiers how to be longshoremen. And he spent all his days and nights down in Philadelphia, actually, and he had a torrid romance with my mother, and I was the byproduct of it.
Huh.
So
how many other
spent a lot of
children
time
were
down
there?
there because, pardon me, please?
How many other children were there, Jack?
I have a stepbrother and two sisters.
Okay.
Two stepsisters from Albert's family. And,
okay.
Albert lived up in Fort Lee, New Jersey.
Okay. All right. Huh.
When he was you weren't under his roof when he was assassinated.
No. I was living in Philadelphia actually when he was assassinated.
Were you on good terms with him?
I had met him, and he came to see me before, but I had people around me that looked after me all my life, and it was always kind of a strange situation, and I didn't know that much about him until he came and saw me, and then he passed away, and he left me 276 pages of a document that explained a bunch of things to me, front and backwards. And then I was taken under tutelage by Meyer Lansky and Frank Costello, and I went to Italy and met Charlie Luciana, and I met a lot of people. You know, I was I spent a lot of time up in New England with Raymond Patriarca and some people in Boston, and I think I'm.
What did you do avocationally in your life that led you to writing? Right?
When I was younger, I was in professional sports. I played professional football, and then I was a world-ranked heavyweight fighter. And then I went into the movie business in 1975, and I've been in the movie business for the last 42 years.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
so I guess the movie will be made shortly after the book.
Well, I started the film business they came to me to do several pictures. I kept telling them no, and then they came to me with a picture with Robert Mitchum called Farewell, My Lovely, and that was a great film, so I did it. And
oh, my God, Robert Mitchum was probably my all-time favorite actor. He's a tremendous actor.
Farewell, My Lovely is a great picture. It's a classic. It's a Raymond Chandler picture. Then I did, you ever see Superman 1 and 2 with Christopher Reeve?
Oh, really?
Well, I was the villain. I was one of the villains that flew around.
Wow.
Really?
Wow. So I've done several very prominent.
I had friends that did the lighting for those movies, the Reed brothers. Do you remember them?
For Superman?
Superman. They
worked out of London? They worked out of England?
No, out of Northern California.
Oh, well, they were only there was only
one was in New York and two were in California at the time.
Well, they shot they shot the bridge in California, and then they shot the building in New York, but we didn't work in New York and we didn't work in California. We worked out of Pinewood Studios for 4 years.
Oh,
okay.
Oh, interesting. Are you still in the movie business?
Yeah, I've got 3 pictures getting ready to. We just signed a deal to do the book as a series, and we're going to do the films. So we're doing the other 3 books, and then we're going to do we're going to do a series and called Family Legacy, and then we're going to do the films, periodic different films and parts of it.
Jack, I have two questions, and then I'm going to let Ronnie take it. First of all, what is your opinion of the book, The Godfather, by Mario Puzo?
I know a lot about the book. I knew, Mario, he wrote a great book. Godfather 2 is probably one of the best movies ever made. The Godfather was compiled of 4 different gentlemen, my father being one of them. When Brando sat down and said when they approached him to do the drug business, and he turned around and said, if we touch it, it'll be the downfall of the families, and our children will touch it. My father said that. And my father died because he wouldn't bring drugs into the ports, and he controlled all the ports of America.
Wow.
So, the night before he was assassinated, he was at the same hotel he was assassinated in with Santo Conti and Carlos Marcellus, and they begged him, Albert, it's only business, and he said it's not a business I signed up for,
Wow.
Jack, I'm a bit of a sports nut, as Ronnie might attest. Where did you play football, and where did you go to college?
Went to school in Western Kentucky, and I left out of there in my sophomore year, and I went up. In that period of time, there were no hardship cases, so you couldn't actually play pro ball till your class graduated. So I
go to Canada.
No, I redshirted with the Jets. Eubank grabbed a hold of me, and I played in an Eastern Coast league that they had for almost be like minor league baseball or something. It was like a bunch of athletes that were waiting to get into the pros and stuff, and Dick Christie and several other people, and we played.
Must have been the first few years after they became the Titans, the Jets from the Titans.
It was, it was actually. You're right. Eubank had just taken over, and it was they liked me a lot, and when it came time for me to be able to play, they had a lot of friends that were down in Philadelphia playing, so I said, I want to go down and play down in Philadelphia, and he said, well, if it doesn't work out, he said, you come back up here, and there's always a spot here for you. And when I got down to Philadelphia, Jerry Wallman had brought Q Harrigan to coach the team, and I watched this guy trade a championship football team away in about a month and a half, and I said, I don't think this is going to work out. So then Ali had just won the title, and I said to some friends of mine, I think I could knock him out, and they said, what a great idea, and they put me in the gym, and it was all the rest is history. So, and I couldn't box. I think I'm one of 10 heavyweights in the history of boxing that became a world-ranked fighter without boxing amateur. I couldn't box amateur because I was a professional football player, so they didn't have that rule in those days.
Did you know Chuck Webner at all?
Oh, sure, I know Chuck well.
Oh, well, he's going to be a guest on our show.
Chuck's a real good guy. Chuck's. We had the same matchmaker, a guy named Al Braverman.
Oh wow! Well, I know that name.
Al Braverman was mob. He was connected with the mob, so he was matchmaker for certain fighters.
I would say, and I think you'll agree with me, the mob is about the most ethical, big organization I can think of when it comes down to it. Am I right?
Yeah.
They're above board in what they do.
I lived my entire life under Merto. I've lived it all my life, and I still live that way. So it's I have the problem is that there's more and more people who have forgotten the word respect in society and in themselves, and we have.
Well, our society in the last 2 years has gone as bad as it was before. It's reached new depths where you can't even explain it. Every day that you get up and there isn't a tragedy, you go, whoa, slow news day.
People. I tell people that when I talk to different places about going and talk about the book, and I explained one thing to them, when my father and people of that genre, ran the streets and controlled things in the country, you didn't have anything called a drive-by shooting. You didn't have, people didn't lock their front doors. Neighborhoods were much safer. You could put a baby pram outside of your house and not worry about somebody coming along and stealing it. It was a different generation, different era.
It sure was. It sure was. Absolutely.
People keep crying about change and this and that and the other thing, and they have to look in the mirror because change starts with the individual. You can't, if you're waiting for a white knight to come charging through to change things, then you're going to be waiting a long time. Change starts with each individual themselves and how they assess their own character and their way of life and voice their opinion.
They look themselves in the mirror and how they go about the track.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. Absolutely.
You already surprised me with that one fact that Jack about your dad. Give me a little kind of a tease as to what will make people go, "Whoa!" in the movie.
I think they're going to be. I think they're going to be surprised at the truth we're going to tell. Like if you read Family Legacy, the book, I start with my father's death and I tell the truth about the Kennedy assassination. And we're going to tell the truth about a lot of things that unfolded in our country and how the changes came about.
You advertise it as being in your book and being the actual truth. Let me say what my theory is, and then I'll see if I'm right. Was it Hoover and Johnson that conspired to kill him?
No. They were part of.
Wrong for 50 years. That was my theory.
You had four fascists in the country that were used as pawns. You had the CIA, and you had the government, and you had the unions, the Teamsters, and you had Johnson and all that crew down there in Texas. And they were all used as pawns, and the whole thing was orchestrated out of Europe. And it was because of one man. If you wanted to look at one guy who was responsible for the death of John F. Kennedy, it was his father, Joseph. His father made a lot of enemies, and people never really look at Joe Kennedy. And what they don't understand about Jack Kennedy is that Jack Kennedy would have never lived out his term. He was dying. He was dying of 4 different diseases. They shot him up every single day. And because of the pain of Addison's disease, which deteriorates your whole back. And he, and I like Jack Kennedy. I met him several times, and he was a hell of a politician. But his father was not a nice person, and his father. No,
he was not a man. He was a bad man.
His father was controlled by Chicago from 1922. He did something in 1922, and when he was bootlegging. And he had a warehouse up in Canada, and his father-in-law was Barney Fitzgerald, who brought all the Scotch in from Scotland, because the Fitzgeralds were a little bit precarious people. But he was the first senator out of Massachusetts. And Joe Kennedy had a warehouse with the guy from Fleischmann's Liquor out of Newark, New Jersey, up in Canada. And he was bringing a load of booze down through Minnesota, and he stole it, and it belonged to the Purple Gang. And the Purple Gang said, "You're a dead man." And he ran back to his father-in-law, and he said, "What am I going to do?" And they said, "Can't help you, son. Only one man in this country can help you, and he's in Chicago." So he went and saw the old man in Chicago, and he sat down, and the guy said, "You know what? You're a real good earner, kid. Now you go home, and I'll take care of the Purple Gang, but here's the deal. You belong to me now." And they had him under thumb. And he was engaged with the Hamilton Club out of Chicago, which was the political stronghold. And they sent him out to California, and they introduced him to Randolph Hearst, and he got involved in the movie business, and he created RKO Studios. He took all the Jewish theater owners and put a distribution deal together for the first time, because Chicago controlled the film industry, because they controlled the Cinematographers Union. And then he did several other things. And then They got him to do something in 1926. He was a brilliant banker. He was a very smart guy. Never take that away from him. In 1926, they had him steal $5 million from Pathé Newsreel stock in broad daylight. Nobody ever caught it. And they said, that's very good. Now, here's what we really want you to do. And they put together, over the next year and a half, they orchestrated a short sell. And the reason they did it was because Europe, who invested in America and who actually built America, all the investment came into this country from the banking cycles and went through London and came out over here, and they built cities, they built railroads, they did all kinds of things, and they weren't getting a great return on their money in 1926. And after we got into war, in World War I, we became a war-bearing country, and we started to manufacture war-bearing materials, and we were taking jobs and revenue stream away from European countries, and they weren't happy about it. So they orchestrated the short sell against 30 companies in Europe, and they ran it for a week, and they did a lot. They made a ton of money. They took off 2 days, and they went back to finish it, and the country panicked, and we had to crash. And the crash at 29, but it bankrupted a lot of these companies in Europe, one of them being a company that Blackjack Bouvier, Jackie Kennedy's father, ran with his father and his uncle, and it was a Rothschild company. So they made some people very angry over there. And then in 19, after the crash, Roosevelt said to Joe Kennedy, you did such a great job. Now we need to rewrite the SEC because they knew everybody had to reinvest in the country to get their money back. But they did it under a set of new rules. And at the end of 35, when he did a great job with that, they sent him to England as the ambassador to England.
Right.
Where he turned out,
while he was ambassador to England,
a lot of ships coming in to save Jews. He turned them back.
Well, he did worse than that. When he was over there, some people from Chicago said, you're going to be in Europe. There's some people we want to tie some loose ends up with, and first thing Kennedy did was he got in bed with the Shah of Iran, who was a gangster, and they put a bank together, and they lent money to Hitler. And then Hitler came back to the same crew, and you had Khashoggi, and they was buying arms from him. So the English government turned around and said, whoa, well, America wasn't in the war. Kennedy didn't think he was doing anything wrong, but he was making a ton of money. And they said, they threw him out of the country. And they sent him home, but he came home as Ambassador Kennedy. No one ever knew why he came home because there was no television, and they controlled the newspapers. The Gore family controlled the papers in Indiana, and Randolph Hearst controlled them on the West Coast. So no one ever printed any stories as to why he was left England. That suggested he come home as Ambassador Kennedy.
Well, hey, Jack, we got to take time out and do a little commercial for your book. How do you get it? How can people out there
go to Amazon? You can go to Amazon. Go to a site called FamilyLegacyTheNovel.com, and it'll take you to Amazon right to the book.
My God, I am so fascinated. I am so fascinated by this topic in every way. Wow, and
this is amazing.
So sure of the accuracy of your information. Tell me about the document that your dad left you.
He left it with a lawyer, and he explained, gave it to my mother, and she gave it to me after his assassination, and it explained from the time he came in the country how all the changes in New York happened, and he explained what was going to happen in the future. Robert knew exactly where things were going, and he was a very incisive guy. He was very bright because he controlled all the ports. That was his bag.
Sure.
When you see it on the waterfront, that was about his brother Tony.
Jack, can you tell me a little bit about his parents, your grandparents?
They lived in Tropea in Calabria, and they died very young. My grandmother had 10 children, and his father was a stonemason, and my grandmother was from Sicilian roots, and his father was Calabrian, and they had. She had, like I said, 10 children, and she died very young, though. I mean, he left the country. He left to come to America in 19. I think his mother died in 21, and his father died in 20, the year before.
Which parent did he take after?
He took after his mother's family from Sicily, the Paganos, and he was very much involved over there. In fact, when he came to America, he couldn't come through Ellis Island. They took him off the boat and took him into Brooklyn. And it's a fascination to show you the power that these guys had. In 1920, he killed his first person on the docks because the guy was robbing everybody. He was a union guy, and so he whacked this guy and they put him in jail for murder. You know, they put him in Sing Sing for murder, and then 18 months later, he got a new trial, and of course there were no witnesses, so they had to let him go, but they never deported him.
Wow.
That much power, that much juice.
And he grew, they all came up together, him, Genovese, a handful, all came up at the same time, and then he hooked up very solidly with Charlie Luciano, and he told Charlie, he said, you know, I'll clear the way for you to sit at the head of the table. And he did. And he killed 4 or 5 people that were in his way, and, you know, and then he became the head of, when Charlie was deported, my father became the head of the most powerful family in the country. And it became the Gambino family, but it was his family prior to that.
Wow. And as a kid, did you have an inkling this was going on?
Sorry?
As a kid, did you have an inkling that this was going on?
Not till after he was assassinated. Then I met a lot of people and knew a lot of things and learned a lot of things. And I think I'm 74. I think there's only 3 of us that are alive that actually I went across the country and I met every single Don in America.
You did?
Wow.
Yeah. And I went to Italy. I lived in Europe for 20 years, and you know,
so you're a Renaissance man.
That's what they say.
Is there a particular spot that you'd live in
I'll retire.
Actually, you do have a choice. So, do you live in New York now?
No, I actually like Boston better, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Like
you have a bit of a Boston twang a little bit.
Well, I park my car every once in a while.
Right.
New York is not like it used to be. You know, I can remember when I could park my car in the middle of of 3rd Avenue and go into P.J. Clark's and you know. Nobody ever bothered my car. There was a cop on a horse would stand there and watch it.
Yeah, well,
you know,
unbelievable.
They're all gone. You know, New York has changed quite a bit. And the West Side was very seedy and healthy and all. Now it's all spring, spick and span and build up, and it's just a different city. It doesn't have the same ambiance as it had when I was a kid. And you know, the people are a lot different, and you know the problem with a lot of the mob, the guys that are up there, they forgot how to make money. You know, they got into Babania and women and stuff like that, and they forgot how to make money. They let the unions go, they let things go, and you know, so there's a lot of people. After my father died, and he was the glue. When he died, things fell apart. The Appalachian thing happened, and you know, the FBI Hoover never bothered New York ever until my father was dead. Because my father made a deal with them in 1939. He handed them Louis Lipke, Buckhalter, because he was costing them a lot of money, and they were partners, and he knew he had to turn them in, and he knew he had to. So he said, I'm not turning myself into the regular law. I'll turn myself. So they arranged a deal. Walter Winchell brokered the deal, and they turned him over to Hoover. He went from my father's car to Hoover's car, and it was the first national criminal that the FBI ever captured, and they never captured him. He walked into the car, and that gave them a lot of credibility. It got them funding and everything else. So, you know.
Well, what a story you tell, my friend.
Oh my God, this is interesting.
But Ronnie, anything to ask?
What type of guy was Hoover?
Hoover wasn't a bad guy. He was a gambling degenerate. You know, and then Frank Costello used to give him horses every day, and you know, he had agents go to the $100 window, and he went to $2 window, and you know, he was Hoover was a gun ho. I mean, he and Tolson came from Chicago, and they were the fastest rising FBI people in the history of the FBI.
Right.
And they were, you know, he was involved with the people in Texas. He was involved. I mean, you got to understand something. In 1960, 4 of the wealthiest men in the world lived in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
You had a guy called Clint Murchison Sr., not Junior.
Okay.
Junior owned the Cowboys and a lot of things, but his father was a 39th degree Mason, and his father, when they built the Long Island Railroad, it wasn't funded by Rockefeller, it was funded by Murchison.
Wow.
Really?
Murchison was one of the wealthiest men in the world. And so you had 4 of them. You had him, and you had H.L. Hunt, who
Lamar Hunt, am I correct?
He was a 14-year-old kid that ran away from Chicago. He came out to
California. And he owned the other Texas team in the AFL, if I recall.
That's correct. He owned the Houston Oilers.
Yeah.
But he was, you know, Hunt was a third-grade educated guy who was a card shark. He won a lot of oil leases and card games and stuff, and he became a very wealthy man, and he was very smart. And you had George and Herman Brown, which was Brown Root, which became Halliburton. And there was a man in Austin, Texas, who had the power of the pen for federal funded situations. So they put a shipbuilding thing in the Houston Harbor, and they built, after World War I, we became war bearing, so they had to build a Navy. These guys built all the ships down in the Houston Harbor, and by 1939, they had $900 million. You know how much money that was in 39?
Oh, wow.
Then you had Sid Richardson, and you had, they all owned the oil down in that East Oil field in Texas, and
and no taxes. This is before income tax.
Well, this is the thing that got Kennedy in trouble, is that when Jack Kennedy was running for president, when he was coming out to California to be nominated, H.L. Hunt came with a ton of money, gave it to his father so that they would take Lyndon Johnson as vice president. And when it wasn't for Chicago and it wasn't for organized crime, Jack Kennedy would have never got nominated, and he would have never got elected president.
No, Daley and his people.
Forget Daley. I mean, his father said he had all the electoral votes in his pocket, which was a bunch of shit. And he turned around and they were there 2 days, and he called up Sam Giancana and he said, "We're in trouble. We need help." And so Giancana made a couple phone calls, and the state of Illinois, which was never Democrat, turned, and 2 states alongside of it turned Democrat. And then the third day, they said, "We still got a bit of a headache, but there's one state that can put us across the line," and that was West Virginia. West Virginia had a lot of electoral votes because of the mining, and there was a lot of money down there.
Sure.
So they called Meyer Lansky, called Dino Cellini, and they owned casinos all through there because of the money down there, and they excused some debt, and West Virginia raised their hand, and Jack Kennedy was nominated.
Right. Amazing.
What his father
Ronnie,
did.
I know your ties to the Kennedys. Is this disillusioning to you at all?
Me? To me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Not really. I mean, my dad was very dear friends with Jack and Bobby. Matter of fact, Jack and Bobby both stayed at our home. My dad was an attorney, and he was also involved with the UAW, Roofers Union.
Yeah.
And if you remember, there was a Kohler strike in Sheboygan, Wisconsin.
Yep.
They were plumbing ware fixtures. And my dad fought this all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they won. The strikers got a lot of money back. And he met them in 1958. The McClellan Committee had a...
McClellan Committee was when Bobby Kennedy made his first name. He started.
That's right. He was chief counsel of the McClellan Committee.
His father had him go after his friends, and when Jack Kennedy, there was a big argument in New York. They said, what do we need Kennedy for? We have already control over Nixon. And Meyer said that. And Gene Conner said, but I've got both Kennedy's ears, and I can do whatever I want and all that jazz. And then when he became president, the first thing that he did was, because the first question they asked was, well, what's he going to do with Bobby? And they said, Bobby's going to be made ambassador to Ireland. They're going to take him out of the country. Well, he didn't. He made him attorney general.
When he made him
attorney general, his father said to him, I want you to put all my good friends in jail. He double-crossed everybody. And then he went down and he told Jack, he said, listen, you need to levy a tax on those oil guys in Texas because all that surplus oil they got, they're not paying any tax on, and they're making a fortune. And when he levied that tax on surplus oil, it cost those people down there $300 million, and they weren't happy.
Not happy at all. Right.
So, you have to understand that, and the person who orchestrated Dealey Plaza and orchestrated the whole assassination was a guy by the name of Carlos Sanchez, who was the Jackal from Europe.
Right. Yeah.
He's the one who orchestrated. He was the guy with the umbrella at Dealey Plaza.
Yeah.
Ronnie, I think we know too much.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Do you think there was more than one shooter?
There were 13 shots fired that day.
How do you like that?
And there were 32 people at Dealey Plaza that day that could have been considered assassins, and one of them being Woody Harrelson's father. He was a hitman for New Orleans, and he was one of the hobos that were going across that bridge. I mean, you got to understand something. If you're going to kill Jack Kennedy, Oswald wasn't even in the building. If you're going to kill Jack Kennedy, you would have done it as the car drove straight at the Byrd Building. Right. Not when it turned down a hill where the wind was terrible and there was trees and signs, and shoot from a window with a mail-order rifle. Forget about it. So he would have taken a shot as he came right at you. It was basically what you got to think about. You got to think about something. You got to think about that. There's the Byrd Building, the book depository that was owned by H.L. Hunt, and Byrd ran it. And there they are on the third floor. The window is open, people moving around with the president in an open car below you. Never, ever should have ever happened. And then you had all those guys coming off the train that were walking over the bridge that went across Dealey Plaza. Never should have happened. You understand?
Right.
So
was Pence's dad? Was it Pence's dad that Trump said was involved with it, or
Pence's dad had nothing to do with it?
And there's some other politician that he ran against in the primaries. He accused.
The whole thing was, there was so much. You had the CIA, the Bay of Pigs. Joe Kennedy told his son, those soldiers should not have any bullets in their guns so that no one pulls the trigger by mistake and makes it and incites something. They don't need any bullets in their guns, and they were all slaughtered.
They were all slaughtered. That's right. They
were slaughtered.
Joe Kennedy was a bad guy.
So, and he was no one tells the story that he actually put money into Cuba. He was putting money into Fidel Castro's pockets.
Joe Kennedy
all the bullshit that people are told. The media just coats anything you want it to be. I mean, there was a prison. There was a prison right across from the window where Oswald was supposed to be at, and there were prisoners looking right out the window, and there were 3 guys in that window that Oswald was supposed to have taken a shot from. And anybody who knows anything about weapons, if you're going to shoot a shot from that distance down into wind and signs and a car moving downgrade, and you got a bolt action mail order rifle, and you're going to do 3 shots in 28 seconds, never in God's name would it ever happen. Number one, for you to take the first shot, you've got to arrest your heart 60 seconds because your pulse is in your finger.
Right.
And if you're going to line up a shot to make it right, you have to have the wind variations, and you're doing it with a mail order rifle. So, you're calibrating with your mind. you better be one hell of a marksman, boy, let me tell you. And the one bullet
Jack,
there, he's total bullshit.
Dare I ask you about Ruby?
Jack Ruby was a guy who had a club in Chicago, and he was a numbers writer. And there was a guy killed at his club, so they sent him to Texas. His sister went down a year before and opened up a restaurant. They sent him down to Texas, and he became an intermediate with Cuba, with Carlos Marcellus and Santo Trafcanti out of Florida, where they were running guns and stuff through Cuba. And he was the go-between. And he was, when they did the Warren Commission, and they went to Ruby, and they locked him up, and the guy, Ruby, sat there, and he said, well, I guess you guys want me to tell you about Chicago. And they said, no. And he said, well, you can't talk to me here in Texas. This is not a good place. You got to move me if you want to talk to me. And they didn't. And they went in and shot him with a needle full of cancer, and he died in jail.
In jail.
But if you ever look at the Zapruder footage, or you ever look at any of the footage, when they locked up Oswald, for one, he was not handed over to the FBI. He just killed the president, supposedly, right? So he's being handled by the Dallas Police Department, and they didn't take one note, and there was no recordings of any of his inquisitions, nothing. And when he's walking out into that garage where Ruby shot him, you saw the captain, the guy that was standing next to him, stepped away from him. And the crowd parted like Moses parting the water, and Ruby walked right up with a gun and shot him. Never should have been able to happen. You know what I'm saying?
No, never.
What all the things that people. Bobby Kennedy was a piece of shit. I never liked Bobby, and nobody else did either. Bobby did whatever his father told him to do. I was with Jimmy Hoffa one time when Bobby Kennedy came after him and jumped in his face and said, I'm going to put you in jail, blah, blah, blah. And Hoffa looked at him and said, Sonny, little boy, get away from me. You're bothering me.
Yeah.
Jimmy was a fun guy. I like Jimmy. Jimmy was a man's man.
Jimmy was my dad knew Jimmy well.
Jimmy was a man's man. Jimmy Hoffa would never ask you to do what he couldn't do himself. Yeah. And what the charge that they put on him was so bullshit, because there would have been no pension if it wasn't for Hoffa.
Right.
There was no union until Hoffa. And they accused him of taking $11,000 to fix his house.
Yeah.
It was such a scam, the whole thing. And his kid's running the union now. He's doing pretty well, actually.
But he's doing pretty good.
Yeah, he's a good
what
kid.
happened to Hoffa?
Jimmy killed himself. Jimmy made one phone call that caused his death. Jimmy never thought he was going to be sitting in jail for a period of time, but the problem was that when they put him away, he thought he'd be out in 6 months, and he wasn't. Mm-hmm. And when he came home, he signed a lot of papers to get out.
Yeah.
And when he came home, the papers that he signed said he wouldn't go near the union, he wouldn't do this, he wouldn't do that, and he walked right in Fitzsimmons' office and told him to get out. He said, this is my desk, my office, get out of my office. And Fitzsimmons said, but you're going to get us all locked up, Jimmy. He said, get the hell out, this is my union, get out of my office. And then he made a phone call to New York, and he started screaming down the phone, I want my union back. And they said, Jimmy, take your time, just take it easy. You just got home. It'll all work out. And he started yelling down the phone, I don't care, you people, you wanted money, we gave you the money for Vegas. But every loan that he ever made to them out of the Teamster pension, they paid back. There was never any tomfoolery with that money. Mm-hmm. And he started screaming at the guy. And then the guy said, Jimmy, you're on the phone, just let it alone. And then he said the magic words. He said, I'll go to the press. And the guy in New York hung up. That was the end of Hoffa.
That was the end. Wow.
And he's not buried anywhere. I'll guarantee you that right now.
No. I'm sure.
How did they dispose of him?
Never going to find his body.
Oh, okay. It isn't under the goalpost at the stadium, like they say?
Not under any goalpost. It's not in any ground anywhere. He's not buried anywhere.
Okay, Jack, I'm going to ask you the magic question on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. When you were a kid growing up in New York, Who did you root for? The Giants, Dodgers, or Yankees?
I love the Yankees. Were great. You had to love the Yankees. They were
all right.
Yankees were great.
It's not a right or wrong, and it's kind of funny because Ronnie's a Dodger fan, and I'm an old. He's an old local Dodger fan.
Yeah, but the Dodgers went west for the money. They abandoned town, man.
That's right.
Yes, there are more than a number of folks on our network who bleed Brooklyn Dodger blue, and Ronnie being one of them.
I tell you, it was one of the greatest World Series you've had in a long time this year. I really thought they had a shot at winning it.
I was in L.A. for Game 1. I
thought they had a shot for winning it. They was one of the best series. But I think the 11-12 game took a lot out of them. And I think then the guy outmanaged them because every six outs they changed pitchers in the seventh game. And what they should have done, the Dodgers should have started that Cy Young. They should have started their best. Should have started Herschel in the first inning. Why bring him in the fifth inning? They should have. They knew he was going to pitch. Pitch him right in the beginning.
Absolutely,
Jack. You are a wealth of information. Let me put it to you that way.
So interesting.
Absolutely. I hope you'll agree to come back, and Ronnie will bring you back when the spirit moves you.
I would love to, for sure, positively. It was nice chatting with you guys. It really was.
Jack,
oh, wow. I know it makes Ronnie feel good because it makes me feel good, and we're right along the same lines. This has been very, very cool beans. So,
hey, Jack, one more quick question.
Sure.
What do they all think of Trump?
I've known Donald for 30 years, and I got to tell you, something. I told people this when he got elected. Give the man 8 months. You have a lot of changes that we had a guy for 8 years that buried this country, and then you had 3 presidents before that didn't do us any favors. Okay, so you got to give this guy one thing about Trump that is different. He's only the second president in the history of the United States that was elected president without owing one favor.
Right. That's true.
He doesn't owe anybody any favors. And I'll tell you, I heard a story about 3 months before he got elected, which it made me really laugh because he was talking to the auto workers, the auto industry owners, and in the middle of the meeting, he stood up and he said, "Gentlemen, when I am elected president of the United States, should you move one more building out of this country, take one more job out of this country, every vehicle you bring back in this country, I will put a 35% tariff on it." And their faces hit the floor. And Michael Moore, the crazy Michael Moore, stood up and he said, "You just got my vote."
Yeah.
Because you got to understand something. The auto industry took billions of dollars off of Obama, and then they moved out of the country.
Right.
Michael Moore was the first one to say that Trump was going to win. He was probably the only one pre-election.
Well, you know what happened? America just got tired and stood up and voted for a change.
Right. Right.
They want their country back. Hopefully, they take it back, and I hope they just keep on. You're getting bombarded by George Soros and the media, and it's all poppycock, man. Give the man a chance to do what he wants to do, and the country has to do changes. But you know what? Changes come from individuals turning around and saying, "I'm not going to live that way any longer. I want my country back. Right. Give me my democracy back."
Sure.
What do you make, Jack, of this institutional craziness that transcends sports and business and the church and the synagogue and all that stuff?
It's your media bullshit. It
comes to abuse like Weinstein and Robin Williams.
Weinstein and people like that should have been exposed a long time ago. But. Sure. When you give our media of today a chance to run with something, they take everything way out of bounds. And a good example of that is, people they sit and watch the news every night at 6 o'clock, like clockwork. or 11 o'clock, okay?
Right,
and what they
right.
don't realize is the news is made for awards. They don't tell you anything. They they take the dumbest things and sensationalize it. You know, all these shootings and stuff. They're making sensationalism out of it, where people say, "Wow, I can get notoriety. All I got to do is go kill somebody."
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's so stupid. You know what I'm saying?
It is so stupid.
And the whole thing is just totally out of line, and it's just, you know, and we need to take our country back. We need to close the border.
Sociologically, what brings it to the point that you could influence someone to want to break a record for mayhem? And
absolutely,
absolutely, it's which came first, the chicken or the egg.
I mean, I shake my head and I look at stuff and I go back to when I was a kid, and I took more guns and knives off of people in the street and stuck them up their ass, because people really don't. When they pull a gun on you, they really don't want to kill anybody, because they think of jail for life and the electric chair. So they move their hand and they wound people, unless they're stoned on drugs.
Yeah.
And most of the killings happen by accident.
Yeah.
It takes a rare individual to look you right in the eye and kill you.
Right. Well, drugs have gone crazy too. I mean, it's gone crazy.
There's a lot of things. I mean, we could talk for hours, guys. I
guess we can. And I hope you will both come back in tandem, as I say, anytime the spirit moves you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Hey, Jack,
Thanks,
do you ever get to Minneapolis? God,
I haven't been up there for a while, and I used to, it's been a while. Jeez, it's a little bit chilly up there, my friend.
Yeah, I know. If you ever get out...
It's a little more chilly in Northern California than Southern California.
We're going to have lunch.
Well, Northern California is my version of Boston. It's California's Boston,
Oh, you come up here and visit. You're always welcome.
Oh, listen, Little Italy's wonderful up there. I love San Francisco. San Francisco's got the best opera in the state. It's got, a lot of good things up there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Remember the day I stole the Charlie one day and took it down the hill? Back in the 70s.
Why doesn't that surprise me?
I had this young lady I was going to impress,
The three of us will be still trying to impress young ladies until they turn us over.
Hey, listen,
that's right.
You can't do that. They might as well shut my eyes.
Absolutely.
Right. Exactly.
God be well tonight, gentlemen. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm Ralph Zig Tyko, flying high over the zone. Thanks, guys. We'll be back next week.
Thanks, Jack. Let's stay in touch. Okay.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye.